Okay, I get it. Every project management system, task management system, work management system, CRM, they all have their own ways of doing tasks, and they really want you to use their tasks with their own notifications. But if I'm honest with myself, sometimes I like to get my tasks done where I use them the most, in my calendar, on mobile. And so if I'm using Gmail and I've got my calendar, I might just add a task here, a really simple task. Here's all the things I need to do before these meetings happen tomorrow. I can pull open a little side panel and see all of the tasks that I have. So is there a way that we can make Google Tasks work better with the systems that our team is already using? Hi, I'm Dan Lehman from AutomationHelpers.com, and we help companies like yours get automated with portals, apps, and integrations. So for this video, we're going to be using Airtable as our work management system, and this would really work with any number of different project management tools or CRMs as well. But the idea here is that Airtable's got these really nice interfaces we can tap into. Let's pretend I am a salesperson and I want to be able to manage the leads that I have inside of the system by adding a follow-up task for me to complete a proposal for someone. So in this case, we've got a couple different options. We could add a button directly within the fields that we have in Airtable, or we've got this really nice larger button that we can use up at the top if we want to have that located here as well. So we need to have a button that's going to kick off this process. Now we're going to use Zapier in this example to handle the actual automation for us. Again, you could use make.com, you could use Pipedream, you could use N8N, whatever you're most comfortable with. So inside of Zapier, we're actually going to create two different zaps. You don't need to do the second zap if you just need the more simplified version of this. But the first thing that we need to do is we need to actually listen to that button being clicked to get the information that we need to be able to kick off this process of creating our Google task. So to do this, the trigger that we're going to use is webhooks by Zapier. Now, again, any of these platforms have their own webhook capabilities. A webhook is just our way of saying, hey, when this event happens, when we hit this certain URL endpoint, now we want to take any data that we send to that URL and we want to go do something with that. So you can come in here, search for webhooks by Zapier. So the first thing you're going to do is set up that webhook. And when you get to the testing step, they're going to give you your own webhook URL. It's not going to be the same as mine. If you've done this in the past, you're going to get a unique one for this particular zap. Now, initially, when you test this, there's no data that comes with it. So in order to test it, what you need to do is take that unique URL that they give you, and we're going to copy that, and then we're going to head back into our work management system to be able to create the URL that we need to hit from inside of Airtable or whatever we're using. So in this case, I added a new field here called Add Task. This is a button field inside of Airtable. This would work with a formula field as well. Somehow we need to be able to take the URL of that webhook that we got from Zapier or the tool that you're using, and then we need to concatenate or append different information, the important data that we want to send from this. Now, let me show you why this is important. Well, in this case, I pasted in my webhook URL. I've got that information here. Now, here's where it gets interesting. I don't just want to send generic information to say, hey, create an arbitrary task. I want to specifically send task information about that lead or about that account I'm working with. And we need to send that information contextually so that we've got what we need to be able to create that task. So here I'm saying concatenate, which means we're going to combine these in one string. We've got our URL here. And then after the URL, you can see I added a question mark. And that means we're going to be able to send across these URL parameters, which are the little pieces of data that we need to make this all happen. So I've got a question mark, and then this comes in a format of the parameter name. In this case, I'm saying the name, and we're setting it equal to, and then I've got some different fields here. So I've got the decision maker's name, or I have a second parameter. We don't add that question mark again. Instead, I just add an ampersand here, and we say, and the email value is going to be equal to, then we say the email, and that's coming from our account record here. And then we say, and the rate value is this hourly rate. So all of these are different pieces of information. You can add whatever you want. We have a more detailed video on Airtable forms if you want some more help in figuring out how to structure the actual URL parameters. The last one here that's really important is that we're also saying, and the account ID, and we're setting that equal to the record ID of the actual account that we click. So if I were to click on Add Task for Galactic Gadgets, that's going to have different information, a different record ID, a different name, all that different information. Then if I clicked this add task, which then it would have the information for Pennywise Finance, its own account ID. So the reason this is so important of us sending along this record ID for that account ID is because if we want to come back and say, hey, after we create this task, we actually want to listen and see if we update, if we mark that task as complete, now we want to be able to go and find that account and change the status. Now, some of you don't care about that two-way integration of data. You just say, hey, if I do something inside of Airtable, I want to be able to create a Google task for it. And that's fine too. But I do want to show you the little bit more complicated setup because for many of you, you might want to have that two-way integration where you're saying, I want it to create a task for me, but then also when I mark that task complete, then I want to go back through and update something back in Airtable. So now if we were to hover over one of these buttons, I hope you can see this in the screen recording, but in the lower left-hand corner here, we've got the URL that concatenates all that information. You can see where it's got that question mark and it says, and name is Luna, and email is Luna Lovegood at her email address, and the rate is $175. That's all the information that we set up as part of that formula or part of that button. So then either from here in our grid view or back in the interface, you can go ahead and click that button. When you click that button, it should come through. You're going to get some kind of response. That's something we could suppress later, but that's what you should be seeing to make sure that that webhook is hooked up correctly. Then back inside of Zapier, we'll be able to find new records and we can choose the most recent one we have from that button click. And you can tell that you've done this correctly because you should be able to get these query string parameters. So we've got our name and an email and a rate and our ID, and that information's coming in. Now, if you see null values like nothing came through or it kind of looks funky, that might be a signal that you need to fix those URL parameters before you continue. The next step that we need to do is create a Google task. And this you can find simply by searching for Google Tasks. And our action here is going to be create task. Now, there's only a few different options that we can do, like create task or update task. So from here, it's going to be pretty straightforward in terms of the configuration. Because once we get to the configuration, there aren't a bunch of custom fields inside of Google Tasks. You really only get a few different options. So when you configure this, of course, you need to authenticate to Google, and you can choose from which tasks you have. So in my case, I have my tasks, but I also have one for sales tasks. So I'm telling it which list I want it to be a part of. And then we can fill in the values, like for here, we've got the title where we wanted to send proposal to Luna, and we have notes for her billable rate and email address. And then this is kind of interesting. For the due date itself, we want to be able to say, this is going to be a task that we have to do today. Here's the things I need to follow up with. Now, you've got a couple of options. You could have a due date coming from Airtable, and we pass that data in directly. Or because I know these are just the things I need to do at the end of the day, I'm going to format it so it's just today's date. Now, I'll give you a secret here. Rather than even Googling how to get today's date inside of a Zap, one of the easiest things you can do for things like this is use Zapier's Copilot, which is in beta. And you can simply say, hey, I want to update my due on, and I want to have that due date be set to today's date. And honestly, it takes like a second, and it's going to plug that value in for you. So I find that Zapier's Copilot is getting better each and every day at helping us with things like simple transformations. So at this point, if you just need the more simplified version of this, you're done after you create this task. You'll want to test this and make sure that it works, and you'll want to have it published and go live. But all you really need is that catch hook, the webhook, and then you need the ability to create that task based on the data that we sent it. If, however, you're the kind of person that says, yeah, but I actually want to be able to update that task, mark it complete, have it update something back in Airtable, then you're going to want to add this third step. So the third step is we're going to create a new record back in Airtable. This might seem like it doesn't make a lot of sense, but what we're doing here, if I head back into Airtable, is I created a separate table called task reminders. Now, there are so many different ways we could do this. This could be written into a data store. You could use something like Zapier tables. We could write this data here, and then really this is just for our system. We don't care about a user seeing it. So we could hide this table so we never really see it again. But the idea is that we're taking information and we're putting that into this table here so that we've got the ID of the task that we just created inside of Google. This is the identifier for it. And then it's also telling it well, what's the account record that this should update at the point in which that task is ready to update? So really, again, does it need to be an Airtable? No, it can be wherever you want. So inside of Google, I could actually go into the details of the record and maybe put in asterisks or curly braces or something, the account ID from Airtable. So we've got some different options of how you want to do it. You don't have to do it this particular way, but I'm just giving you an idea of how you might want to accomplish that. So back inside of Zapier, what we're saying is, hey, let's go ahead and create a new record from Airtable. And when we configure it, all we need to do is say, let's plug it into this base, into this table. We're going to take the ID from the previous step of creating the task. That's where that comes from. And then the account ID is going to be what we sent originally from Airtable to Zapier, the ID that we have inside of that Airtable table. And then ultimately you can test this new functionality when you press this Add Task button. But now let's talk about the second Zap that we need to create if we want to be able to update that back inside of Airtable. So let me go ahead and edit this one. I just named this Update Airtable upon a completed Google task. So we're going to kick this off with when the Google Tasks sense that there is a new completed task. That's my trigger event here. And unfortunately, there's not a direct webhook in Google Tasks. So Zapier's done some nice little logic here to be able to tell us when we have a new completed task. It's doing a little bit of polling in the background. So from here, it's going to detect that, yes, we have checked off this task. It is now marked complete. That's what's triggering this. And our second step here is to be able to find a record. Well, which record is it that we're trying to find? Back in Airtable, remember how we had that task reminders table? This is what it's trying to find. So it's going to search for, is there a task ID that matches with this task that was just completed in Google Tasks? And if so, we want it to return the value of the account ID from Airtable. So we can check out our configuration settings here, which is to say it's coming from our CRM, coming from our task reminders table. We're going to search by field the task ID. We're going to plug in, and this is really kind of wonky here. If we delete this value out and we're putting in a new one, instead of just calling it ID, it's calling it original ID. And now what it calls ID actually includes the timestamp as part of it. So that's one thing that's a little bit wonky about this, just so you're aware, is you're going to want to make sure that you use original ID and not ID, or else it's not going to be able to find that value. So make sure that gets mapped in there. That's the most important part. Yes, we're going for an exact match. And then we don't need to create an Airtable record. If it doesn't exist, we'll just have it fail at that point. So that's how it's going to find the correct record. Then the next step is going to be to update the account record that it actually found. So here, if we go into the config settings, we are searching against our accounts. And what are we searching for? We're going to update the exact record that we just got in the previous step. So this was returned from our find record step, and we've got this specific record ID that it came back with. And here's where you could update any values that you want. In my case, we're keeping it really simple, that I'm updating this status to proposal sent. But you might want to be able to put in the time at which the task was completed. So that could go into a different field as well. If you want to say, yes, this was completed, and here's the time or the date that this was completed as well. Now, the last thing we need to do is just a little bit of housekeeping, maintenance kind of stuff, which is to say that we don't really want that temporary record of the task reminder in Airtable. That doesn't need to continue to live there forever with thousands of records that live there. Instead, we want to update that so we keep that table clean. So to do that, we're going to delete a record. We're going to use the delete record action event. And in the configuration, we're simply telling it, hey, grab that task reminders table, and we're going to plug in the ID of the record that we previously found in the find record step. Yeah, we're done with that. So we're going to go ahead and delete that record. Note, we're not deleting the account record. We're deleting that temporary task reminder record that we created. So once those zaps are published, you're good to go. Let's test this out. We're going to click on our button to add a task. And now inside of Google Tasks, whether you access that from Tasks itself or your Google Calendar, we can click on that. We can see now all that information we sent over, send proposal to Luna, the decision maker name, and the rate that they have and the email. All of that information is there, and that can be configured to the exact message that you want to have. Now, I did all this work at the end of the day. I sent the proposal out to Luna. I'm good to mark this complete, so I'm going to check this off. And then here back in Airtable, this should have updated the value to proposal sent. So now we've got everything complete. We created the task and we checked it off. If these kind of automations could be helpful for your business, don't hesitate to reach out to our website at automationhelpers.com, where we're offering free 30-minute consultations.